on a Wednesday night. I'm Kevin Walsh with you here. It is Game Time Decisions, and we have 2 hours to go through this Wednesday board full of college basketball, a fun NHL slate as well. Tomorrow, the NBA will be rejoining us. We also have, for those interested, the MLS season debuting tonight. And rightfully, we have Lionel Messi in action. Some odds boosts are out there on what is a lot of people's GOAT. He is booked around, I believe, minus 130, minus 135 for an anytime goal scorer in the matchup for Miami. All stuff that we can get throughout tonight's show. Great group joining us. CT Betts, Joe Madden, Scott Wetzel, I know, is loaded for plays as we'll look ahead to what the in-game live crew has on their plate. Brady Cannon as well. The PGA Tour heads to Mexico this week, so we will break that all down for you here tonight on SportsGrid. But as we open it up on Game Time Decisions, we look back at last night's big game in the Big East. Creighton hosting UConn. A 3.5 point home underdog rout. The Huskies 85-66. This game goes over the listed total. And Creighton was up, I believe it was 14 at the break. They laid 7.5 at half. So this team just continued to extend and pull away from what is still the number one team in the country. I think it's a good chance that when the AP poll comes out again, assuming UConn doesn't lose over the weekend, they will remain top status, but potentially could lose that unanimous status, depending on how Houston and Purdue's weeks play out. Creighton is certainly going to get a lot of love for what they were able to do here against the UConn Huskies. As we bring our radio audience into the fold, Sirius XM Channel 159, Kevin Walsh with you on Game Time Decisions. But this result here last night, it did impact the futures market a bit. If you look at the national championship price for the Huskies, comes on back now to 5-1. This number was plus 450, 4-1. And we mentioned going into that game last night, if it went against us on Creighton, they were the right side. Happy to be a part of it. Listen, we ended up losing on the San Diego State side. Got home Iowa. It was overall a solid night of college hoops betting. But if we ended up wrong on the Creighton side and UConn dominated another top 15 team, the other great Big East team, if that's how you view it, their number was going to continue to drop. But the loss, it pushed them back a little bit. Creighton's still trying to crack into this upper echelon of the outright market. I think the thing for the Blue Jays, would a win like that over UConn, they can certainly get the label of talented enough to beat anybody, but they have some bad losses this year. Creighton, I think that's the worry for them, ultimately stringing together enough wins throughout the college basketball season. Let's pop into tonight's slate here. A lot of good ranked action. The SEC provides us a ranked matchup tonight with Florida and Alabama, and a huge total. You like points? This is your game. 174 at last look was the listed total here between the Crimson Tide and the Florida Gators. Other SEC action here would be Kentucky laying 5.5, 6.5 tonight against the LSU Tigers. We've got some mid-major action here in the Mountain West. Also, Dayton goes to George Mason with a light number. Your early start tonight is Illinois and Penn State. The Nittany Lions going to out their leading scorer, so that's why they're catching as many points as they are against the Illini. Here, the number 7.5. We will see how Penn State fares tonight in a Big Ten battle. Again, this is the earliest start that we have on tonight's board at 6:30. We will again be going through that college slate. CT Betts is here at 6:10, so don't go anywhere. We'll pop over to the NHL board. Really interesting slate of games tonight. I think the one that'll catch a lot of eyes, though, is Boston and Edmonton. I'm actually involved with this game. I've been talking about on the show, trying to get involved with more player props on the NHL side of things. There is a player prop that I'm on tonight, but I am also betting a side. I mean, why not spoil it? I'm on Edmonton at minus 134. Really interesting spot. I understand the Bruins have been really good on the road, and I understand that the Boston Bruins are a team that a lot of people respect, including odds makers. But this is a team that's lost 5 of 7. They go to Edmonton. Their last loss at home was in December, and you have a money line underneath minus 160. We'll talk about that. I want to get Scott Wetzel's thoughts on that game. Look, other late nights, it's a late night board, mostly, right? Toronto, we'll see what Austin Matthews can do against the Coyotes. Columbus and Anaheim there. Earlier starts Bedard in action against the Flyers, and then Montreal, slight home dog against the Buffalo Sabres. Let's re-rack back to something we've talked about now both on Monday and Tuesday, and that is quarterback movement in the National Football League. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and what is next for these teams. So you see Justin Fields booked minus 130 to go to the Atlanta Falcons, plus 350 on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then 4-1 on the Chicago Bears. But the huge movement has come in on Russell Wilson, minus 250 to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, plus 550 Vegas Raiders, and then plus 650 on the Atlanta Falcons. Now, don't be surprised if that Raiders team starts to creep into the conversation with the Justin Fields talk. I think there's some rumors on the interwebs right now around Vegas being interested in Justin Fields. We talked earlier in the week with Joe Lisi. We'll talk later in the week with, potentially, maybe Mike Blewett, get his thoughts, knows this Pittsburgh organization well. This still surprises me. Odds are odds. For me, I prefer a Washington or a New England as a landing spot for Russell Wilson. I think Russ being a starter who allows a first-round draft choice to come along works fine. And I think both New England and Washington are, with year-one head coaches, they probably don't want to win 2-3 games. Russ is good enough to prevent that from being the case, I think, ultimately. Pittsburgh, if they bring in Russell Wilson, they're basically trying to do what Denver did when they brought in Russ. And Arthur Smith, who can be a solid offensive coordinator for Pittsburgh, I don't think it's going to be held in anywhere near as highly regarded as Sean Payton is. And we saw what Sean Payton got out of Russell Wilson. The flat numbers looked good. Yards per attempt dropped. Clearly the trust wasn't there from Sean Payton. It's an odd move for Pittsburgh and not one that I'm loving. Justin Fields, by the way, in the news a lot, went on the St. Brown podcast, right, and talked a little bit about unfollowing the Chicago Bears. He's said, look, I don't want to see it on my timeline anymore. I also unfollowed the NFL. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a little too much. With the keep Fields, move on from Fields, Caleb Williams talk. To a degree, I get that. I at least appreciate the fact that Fields addressed it and didn't act like we weren't making something out of nothing. That's probably because he was talking to Amon-Ra St. Brown instead of Adam Schefter. That's just how these things tend to go. But I still think the end result is going to be Justin Fields out of Chicago. Certainly something we will be keeping our eyes on. Let's put a quick pick on the board tonight. Player prop style college basketball. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish are going to Louisville. This line's flipped a bit. They're a dog at Louisville. These are the two worst teams in the ACC. But Marcus Burton has started to come on for the Irish. The efficiency is still lacking a bit. It's getting better. And he's starting to add a lot more volume on his three-point shots. So let's get him to make 2+ at a plus price. CT Bets is next here, breaking down the college board on Game Time Decisions.
Caravan came back. They did have a couple of transfers here. The reality is UConn is every bit as talented and dangerous as they were 1 year ago.
If there's a guy, Joe Ranieri, that for one game could take a bunch of cast-offs and steal a game, his name's Eric Spoelstra.
Game Time Decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Like the Minnesota Wild were down by 2 goals today. They were down by 3 goals, actually, today at one point. And they came back and won. Like teams like, the Edmonton Oilers and the Coyote game went back and forth. The NHL really, you could argue, really is the best sport for in-game betting, where you can pull the trigger on both teams.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
What do we do with the Nets, though? Because this team is hot garbage. I mean, poor Jacques Vaughn. Talk about just wrong place, wrong times.
I mean, the reason that they parted ways with Jacques Vaughn in the first place, this is a team that, yes, they had Kyrie and KD at the beginning of the year last year, but they were still a team that made the playoffs. They were still a team that took the game off the 76ers. And going into the All-Star break, they weren't even in the play-in picture.
Newswire. Only on SportsGrid. Smarter to be on SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from three on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live. Prime time.
We got not one, but two coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
this
late
sort
night.
of has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
We're live on Game Time Decisions with a big-time college basketball board to get to, and to help us out with that is CT Betts, who's having himself a great college hoop season. CT, how are you? Appreciate you joining the show.
Kevin, always a pleasure. Great to be here with another nice loaded slate on the college hardwood.
And I know the big game tonight is one you're invested in, and that's in the SEC. 13 Alabama, 24 Florida. And this total, for a lot of people, is going to be eye-catching. 173.5, one of the highest we've seen all season long. But I think a side in this SEC matchup has your attention.
Yeah, I tweeted this one out earlier this morning, Kevin. If you follow me, you got a good number. I tweeted out Bama -8. It's ticked up a little bit here. I think 9.5, maybe some 10s here. And it's another ranked versus ranked matchup, and both these teams come in pretty hot here. Gators, they're actually top 10 nationally in offensive efficiency, and they really like to play fast, right? So they're probably coming into tonight's game thinking they could keep up with Bama. And I just don't think we're going to see that tonight. The Tide are actually number one in the country in offensive efficiency. And, man, they've really been putting up some points. They put up another 100 spot yet again their last game in a smoke show over A&M and Nate Oates' squad. Man, another big-time convincing win at home. And it's pretty wild, Kev, to see how good the Gators have been offensively because, as you know, they really struggle to shoot the deep ball consistently. 34% to be exact from beyond the arc. I think that catches up with them tonight, Kev. I know both teams struggle on the defensive side of the ball. The Gators might keep pace for a little bit here, but I trust the Tide to come up with more stops here and pull away in another convincing win at home. So I'm good with anything under 10 here.
Yeah, I got to tell you, we talked about recently because of what UConn did to Marquette, and then probably to a degree what Creighton did to UConn about most impressive wins of the college hoop season. Alabama beating A&M is probably not going to get submitted by a lot of people. They scored 100 points on a team that is outside of the top 300 in tempo. It's one of the more impressive things I think any team has done all season long. So I expect them to get up and down here against Florida, no doubt. In the Big 12 tonight, Cincinnati and Oklahoma State is an interesting one. When you look at the way this Big 12 overall has been so impressive, Oklahoma State is someone is going to lose a bunch of games, and that's basically Oklahoma State. This year, they probably wish they were playing in a different conference. What do you make of them tonight catching double digits from the Bearcats?
Yeah, right. I mean, it does feel a little high here if you're going to be on Cincy, which I am. But I have Oklahoma State power rated lower than UCF, who Cincy beat by 11 on this floor, and they covered the 7.5, I believe it was. So I know Okie State, they've been without Bryce Thompson for a while, and it means that other players have had to step up for Oklahoma State, which they have, right? They had big wins over K-State and in BYU. I think that's unlikely to happen here. The Pokes, they struggle to score on the road. And I think we're going to see that tonight. Cincinnati, one of the best in the country at defending the rim. Like the two bigs that they have, they're as good as it gets as far as rim protection goes. So teams have to really be able to make shots to beat Cincinnati. And Cincinnati, right, they're also 10th nationally in rebounding, while Oklahoma State, they rank outside the top 200. So not only does that mean there's going to be fewer like second chance points for Okie State, but it probably means some pretty easy putbacks for Cincinnati at the same time. And they turn the ball over a ton, and that's just a cardinal sin playing against Cincinnati. This Cincinnati team has real issues offensively, but they clean up the missed shots. Yeah. Kev, Okie State 0-7 on the road. I think the Cowboys are the worst team in the Big 12. I think there's a big drop-off down to UCF, Westphal, and Oklahoma State. And I think Cincy likely wins by double digits here tonight.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I was tempted maybe by a Cincinnati team total, maybe Skillings Jr.'s on his points prop. This game, Oklahoma State is, around 100th, right, in defensive efficiency. This team's last 3 games in Cincinnati, UCF, Iowa State, Houston, those are all top, 15, 20 defensively? Yeah. Like, it is going to feel tonight like they are playing, Chicago State on the defensive side of the basketball, just getting away from those high-level teams. Let's stick with the Houston Cougars, CT, because they had a big win earlier this week against Iowa State. How do you feel about Houston right now, who usually is kind of a divisive team from years prior, playing in a mid-major? This year, they're playing in the Big 12, for a lot of people, the very best conference in college basketball. What do you make of Houston at a high level?
Yeah, definitely the best conference in college basketball. Kevin, I'm a Baylor grad. I'm going to the game this Saturday in Waco. Should be a good one. And I think Houston's a great team, right? We know they're really well coached. They have the pieces. They have dudes. And they're very tough to prepare for, right? Because of how well they play defensively and how difficult they make it for teams to score. But the problem is they really struggle to score themselves. And if Shed and Cryer have off nights and they both don't put up at least double digits, then it's very hard for them to win games. They're not a flashy team, and they really play hard. But by playing hard makes them get into foul trouble. And so they're not a deep enough team to be able to sustain that problem. We saw it Monday night, Kevin. I had Houston -8. It was a great number. Most people had -8.5, -9. Looked like numerous times that Houston was going to win and pull away by double digits. But then what happens? Jawan Roberts and LJ Cryer, they get into foul trouble. And we find Houston having Sampson has to sit them both on the bench with 4. And they're relying way too much on Shed to score. Like, not to mention their struggles from the charity stripe. That's a huge problem to close out games. It's been all year for Sampson's team. And I really think that's going to catch up to them in March, Kev. Like, they're just not deep enough to get into that trouble and be able to kind of go on a run, in my opinion. Not sure where you stand on that.
I agree. Here's the deal, and I don't think it's because I was burned last year. By the time the bracket was finalized, I was like, this is their year. And a lot of that is, look, I know college is not the NBA, but man, it really helps when you have NBA talent. And Sasser and Jerace Walker were both first-round picks. You think back to the Gonzaga knocked on the door every single year. And then all of a sudden they got NBA talent, and it was like, oh, well, it's about to happen. And it didn't. And after the Chet Holmgren year, you went, oh, wait a minute. Mark Few now is not nailing McDonald's All-Americans and getting these guys on the team. He's not being able to win these recruiting battles. And Gonzaga has not been at that same level. Now, I know Houston is right here, but it is hard to break through, to your point, CT. And this roster, I don't care what anybody says, is nowhere near as good as last year's, CT, and last year's wasn't good enough.
I It's so funny that you say that because I talked to my buddy this morning on the phone, and we're going to the game together. And I always like to use this analogy that Calvin Sampson can carry a dying horse on his back to get there for water and make him live. And I'm with you. I thought that last year was the team. And, man, they really shocked me in the Sweet 16 with Miami taking it to them. Totally agree with you. Houston was absolutely a better team last year. And, Kev, everybody is all over this Houston team this year. A lot of people have them power rated number 1. I'm sorry. I just don't see it. Kev, I was with you last night. We both had Creighton, and I still think that UConn is the most complete team in the country. How hard it is to repeat, as we both know, hasn't been done since the Gators and Billy Donovan. But I still think they're the most complete team here. I just think this Houston team isn't going to be able to put it together here and win all of them in a row to get crowned the national champion.
Look, I agree, CT. And for me, look, the Big 12 is very good. I'm not saying it's not. But for about 3 years in a row, the Big 10 sent the whole conference to this tournament. And then we went, oh, wait a minute. Maybe beating each other shouldn't be worth that much. I think time will certainly tell. CT, absolutely appreciate it. Best of luck tonight. We'll do it again soon.
Thanks, Kev. Appreciate you.
All right, awesome stuff there. Brady Cannon is going to stop in next year on Game Time Decisions as we get set for the upcoming PGA Tour event this week.
Caravan came back. They did have a couple of transfers here. The reality is UConn is every bit as talented and dangerous as they were 1 year ago.
If there's a guy, Joe Ranieri, that for one game could take a bunch of cast-offs and steal a game, his name's Eric Spoelstra.
Game Time Decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Like the Minnesota Wild were down by 2 goals today. They were down by 3 goals, actually, today at one point. And they came back and won. Like teams like, the Edmonton Oilers and the Coyote game went back and forth. The NHL really, you could argue, really is the best sport for in-game betting, where you can pull the trigger on both teams.
Sports Rage Late Night. Only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
What do we do with the Nets, though? Because this team is hot garbage. I mean, poor Jacques Vaughn. Talk about just wrong place, wrong times.
I mean, the reason that they parted ways with Jacques Vaughn in the first place, this is a team that, yes, they had Kyrie and KD at the beginning of the year last year, but they were still a team that made the playoffs. They were still a team that took the game off the 76ers. And going into the All-Star break, they weren't even in the play-in picture.
Newswire. Only on SportsGrid. Smarter to be on SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell Coast to Coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game Time Decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live. Prime time.
We got not 1, but 2 coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
Late
sort of
Night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Live right here on a Wednesday night. I'm Kevin Walsh. It is Game Time Decisions on SportsGrid. Now joined by Brady Cannon. Brady, how are you?
I'm great, my friend. How are you doing?
I am good. I'm good. We've got the Mexico Open to discuss, but before that, I have to ask you about Riviera because you and I were able to because I think Tiger forced it. We talked every day during the week after each round, and for me, it was just kind of all right, I know Cantley's over with it. And I didn't get involved, and I let it go. And then when I got the alert to my phone that Hideki ended up winning this event, shot a 62 on Sunday. Just take me through what you saw play out over the weekend at the Genesis Invitational.
Boy, I tell you, it was really awesome. And unfortunately, I made money. I hit 3 guys in the top 20, and I won both of my head-to-head matchups. But I was on Will Zalatoris in-game. I bet him after Thursday. And my question was, I didn't bet Zalatoris pre-tournament because I still wasn't sure about his health. He had played pretty well at Torrey Pines, but I just wasn't quite sure yet. And when I saw what he did on Thursday at Riviera, I'm like, okay, I'm going to jump in. And then he comes, oh so close in the end. And like you say, Matsuyama, just an absolutely stunning round on Sunday. Comes out of nowhere, really. I didn't know a lot of people that were on him pre-tournament. It's not like he came into this tournament red hot in form or anything like that. But he just absolutely was guns a-blazing on Sunday. Birdies the first 3 holes, birdies the first 3 holes on the back 9, and then basically birdies the last 3 holes, 3 out of the last 4. And I don't know if you saw the shots on 15 and 16, but his approach into the green was almost identical. And the first one on 15 was from 187 yards, and he put it literally to about 3 inches and did the same thing on the next hole, the par 3. And that's when I knew I was pretty much cooked. Willie Z made a bogey on 15, but really electric to see Hideki put on a performance like that. I mean, this is not an easy golf course. This is one of the hardest courses on tour, and he shot a 62 on Sunday to win it. Very impressive. I'll tell you what was really wild, Kevin, and you and I talked about this as well, and it's a big part of my handicap every year, the connection between Augusta National, the Masters, and Riviera. We see so much crossover success between the 2 golf courses. They're not necessarily similar, but they do have some characteristics and some skill sets required that appear to be pretty powerful, more than I know. Hideki becomes the 17th guy that has won the Masters and won at Riviera. And what's so wild is in 2021, when he won the Masters, who was runner-up? Zalatoris. Who was in 3rd place? Xander Schauffele. The same exact lineup on the top of the leaderboard there as what we saw last week.
That is pretty remarkable. Another thing, and look, I'm just going to keep making note of it as long as it's true. Ho-hum, Scotty Scheffler, top 10. Yeah. Not really in the mix, but it's just every single week. And it's just any event he's in. If you can get, I don't know, minus 150 from the B top 10, they're going to pay out on Sunday.
You know, probably get better than that, really.
Yeah.
Maybe, you're probably close. Maybe minus 135. But, it's becoming such a trend that, like you say, that he's just, almost automatic to finish top 10. If this guy ever learns to putt, Kevin, he'll win every week.
There has to be. I have to admit, I sometimes know when I am obsessed with something, and the Scheffler stuff has had my attention for a year now. I am fascinated by it because guys like you who know this stuff so well have all said, if he ever figures it out, he could go on a Tiger run.
Yeah.
The thing is it going to ever, I guess that's just what made Tiger Tiger, though, Brady. And I know Scotty's not even in the tournament this week. We will get to the Mexico Open, but is there going to, do you think at some point, maybe during this PGA Tour season, where Scotty can rip off 4 out of 6 events outright?
Yeah, I do, because he did it a couple of years ago. It was right. Like the Phoenix Open. I think he won, I want to say he won 3 or 4 starts in a row. He didn't necessarily play 3 or 4 weeks in a row, but he won the Phoenix Open and Bay Hill. And maybe that was the same year he won the Players or the Masters. He won like the Masters, Bay Hill, Phoenix. I mean, he won like 4 or 5 events in about an 8 to 10 week period. It was definitely remarkable. And you think about his win at the Masters. Obviously, you need to know how to putt really well at Augusta. But the putter has just really escaped him for probably nearly 2 seasons now. And he's obviously aware of it and he's working on it. He's changed putters. He's, worked with different instructors. He's going to figure it out. He's obviously just too talented of an athlete, I think, to not be able to putt at least decent. If he just putts decent, he's going to win a lot more events.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, let's start with the Mexico Open. Here's what stands out to me at the top of the board. Finau 9-1. Hogard, who you told us about a couple of weeks ago, is at 14-1. Those are the only 2 golfers sub 22-1 right now, just using the FanDuel Sportsbooks odds. I know it can always vary. Golf, you always want to make sure you get the best of the number. But this looks like a field, Brady, where it's kind of tiered off. It's Tony, it's Hogard, it's everybody else.
Yeah, and it's been that way the last couple of years. This is only the 3rd edition. Actually, this tournament's been around for about 80 years, but just the 3rd year on the PGA Tour schedule. And the first 2 editions, we saw the favorite win, Jon Rahm and Tony Finau. And I went with Hojgaard for a second time. You mentioned there that we were on him a few weeks ago at Torrey Pines. He finished runner-up. That was kind of a tough beat. But, if that holds true again this week at Mexico the way it has in the past, he ought to be right there. I think you could argue he's the very best player in the field. He also finished runner-up last year at Corrales Punta Cana. The Corrales Golf Club made my list as one of the correlated courses, a coastal design, big wide fairways, past Palom greens. So, it worked for Hojgaard in the past. It might work again this week.
Yeah, I don't mind that one bit. Tell me, how else are you looking to play the outright market here at the Mexico Open?
Yeah, played Hojgaard outright, actually got plus 1650 on him. And I've seen him bounce around between like 17 and 14. I was able to get a pretty good number there, my shortest shot. And then I went a little deeper to Stefan Jager, who was in the lead at Torrey Pines right there with Hojgaard a few weeks ago and ended up settling for 3rd. He's played here twice. He's finished 15th and 18th. He's long off the tee. Most of the guys that have had success here, if you look at the top of the leaderboard in the past, are bombers, and Jager can bomb it. And I think that swing and a miss, if you will, at Torrey Pines probably helps him, builds a little scar tissue for the next time he's in contention. He may be able to get it done, and that could be this week. And then I went a little further down into the 60s with Mark Hubbard at 60-1. He's number 1 in this field over the last 24 rounds for strokes gained approach, and he comes in pretty hot. He's finished 18th here before, and he was 20th at Torrey Pines, and then followed that up with a 4th place finish the very next week at Pebble Beach. Then to 65-1 on Michael Kim. This is really the only guy that I have on my card that's not a bomber, but he does everything else well. He's 12th in this field the last 24 rounds for strokes gained approach, and 2nd for birdies or better gained. He just finished 6th recently at the American Express, and also last year finished 7th at the Wells Fargo Championship. Quail Hollow is another course that I think requires similar skill sets to Vedanta. And let's remember, he finished 7th there, shooting all 4 rounds in the 60s, and that is against a signature event class field. So that's pretty, impressive when you're getting a 7th place finish against a field like that. And this field here this week, incredibly much more watered down. And then I went a little bit deeper to Alejandro Tosti, the Argentinian and former Florida Gator. He finished 10th here last year, one of the longest bombers in this field, and also a really good short game, good at scrambling, 26th in this field for strokes gained putting. So we'll see what he can do. And then Austin Eckroat at 70-1, pretty decent as far as the correlated courses and the stats. Nothing really jumps off the page, but this guy really made an impression on everybody when he finished 10th at last year's U.S. Open. That was kind of his coming out party. And what we see in this field, Kevin, really from top to bottom, outside of Finau and Hojgaard, it's a lot of young, up-and-coming talent. And I think Austin Eckroat is one of the guys at the top of that list. I wouldn't be surprised if he showed out this week one bit. And then finally, my longest shot at 100-1, Chesson Hadley, who's really a veteran on tour, a tour journeyman, and I think one of the better players in this field. I'm a little surprised at his odds, and maybe it's because all that young talent that I referenced, but this guy's been going along well. Another correlated course for me, the Country Club of Jackson, where they play the Sanderson Farms. Hadley was runner-up there in 2017, and he was also runner-up at Congaree in 2021, another correlated course for me. I think that, this guy his name has been popping up. He hasn't been able to put it together for 4 rounds, but again, against a watered-down field here this week, I think he ought to do pretty well. And Kevin, I should tell you too, I played all these guys outright and for a top 20 finish.
Yeah, which, again, we kind of talked about, and I'm sure people are aware of, but always good to reemphasize. Outrights is only one way you can play. I mean, they have countless options here. I know there are some head-to-head matchups that you have, Brady. I'm going to ask you to just come back at the top of the next segment here and break those down because I know there's some great stuff there for people. And then we're going to dive into this college basketball board for people. It is a loaded night here on Game Time Decisions. Brady Cannon's going to be back with us in a moment. And there's a head-to-head matchup involving the top 2 guys. So we will get to that. Close out the Mexico Open, and then start to hit this college hoops board here, which is already underway with that big game in the Big Ten, Penn State, Illinois. We are back in just a couple of moments on SportsGrid.
Caravan came back. They did have a couple of transfers here. The reality is UConn is every bit as talented and dangerous as they were 1 year ago.
If there's a guy, Joe Ranieri, that for one game could take a bunch of cast-offs and steal a game, his name's Eric Spoelstra.
Game Time Decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Like the Minnesota Wild were down by 2 goals today. They were down by 3 goals, actually, today at one point. And they came back and won. Like teams like, the Edmonton Oilers and the Coyote game went back and forth. The NHL really, you could argue, really is the best sport for in-game betting where you can pull the trigger on both teams.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
What do we do with the Nets, though? Because this team is hot garbage. I mean, poor Jacques Vaughn. Talk about just wrong place, wrong times.
I mean, the reason that they parted ways with Jacques Vaughn in the first place, this is a team that, yes, they had Kyrie and KD at the beginning of the year last year, but they were still a team that made the playoffs. They were still a team that took the game off the 76ers. And going into the All-Star break, they weren't even in the play-in picture.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid. Smarter to be on SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell, coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game Time Decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not 1, but 2 coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
Late
sort of
Night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Back with you here, Game Time Decisions. Before we get to tonight's College Board, Brady Cannon has some head-to-head matchups for the Mexico Open. And Brady, again, I know you told people the outrights are fun, finishing positions, but sometimes the head-to-heads is really where you find your advantages. So what do you have for the people?
No, you're exactly right, Kevin. And just some betting advice when you're betting golf. You're exactly right. The outrights are fun. That's where all the glory is. That's where you get all the likes on social media when you hit the big long shot and all that good stuff. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's like picking a needle out of a haystack. And, you know, if you're really good, you might hit 8 or 10 all season out of 45 tournaments. So it obviously doesn't happen every week. So that is the smallest amount of risk that I wager is in the outright market. And then I will put bigger risk in the top 20s. And then my biggest amount of risk is in the head-to-head matchups. That's where you have the best chance to beat the house. It's only about a 4% hold in the head-to-head matchups, where in the outright market, you could be looking at possibly a 35% hold. So your chances are much better basically picking Team A against Team B. And I went with 3 here. And so much about matchups is based on price, as is everything. But I think in the matchups, you know, it's kind of right there in front of you. In a futures market, you know, one guy's 60-1. How do you know he shouldn't be 40 or he shouldn't be 80? Nikolai Højgaard in a matchup, a head-to-head matchup, this is for the full tournament, Højgaard at plus 135 against Tony Finau. And I just felt that was too heavy. I'm not so sure this shouldn't be a pick'em or so. Maybe Finau, you know, he's the defending champ. Probably at the end of the day, he's rated as the better player, but Højgaard's awful good. So I'm thinking Finau maybe minus 120, 125 at the most, but not minus 155. And I've seen him come down a little bit, but I would say if you could get plus 125 or better on Højgaard, I think that's a pretty good price. I think he's got a great chance not only to win this tournament, but to beat Tony Finau. And then Alejandro Tosti, another guy who I'm on for an outright at 66-1. I've got him plus 106 over the Swede, Vincent Norman. Now, Norman is another big hitter, but I kind of like the way everything sets up for Tosti. The Argentinian, I think, will be more familiar with these parts than a guy who has never played here before from Sweden. You know, it's just a different environment, I believe, and more close to home for Tosti, who has played here in the past, also played in Gainesville, where you kind of have that tropical humidity and some of the afternoon breezes that kick up. I think he is a better fit for this property. And then finally, Austin Eckroat, I talked about being a young up-and-comer. He's at even money. I like him over Maverick McNeely. Now, a lot of people like McNeely this week. He's a great putter, one of the best putters on tour, but he's also a shorter hitter. And I just don't see, and you know, I'm on Michael Kim, who's a shorter hitter. So it's not to say a short hitter can't get it done around here. McNeely hasn't been in fantastic form really for a couple of years. He's coming off of injury. I think Eckroat is going to have a good week, and I like him better than Maverick McNeely. And, you know, you're getting him as a short underdog.
All right, boom. There it is. Some outrights, some top 20s, and some head-to-heads. Brady, we appreciate it. I am sure we will check in throughout the week. Best of luck with the Mexico Open.
All right, great, Kevin. Thank you.
All right, awesome stuff there. Let's hit this college basketball board now because the 7 o'clock window is where this really starts to open up. Penn State, by the way, does hold an early lead over Illinois, 16-12. And that Penn State spot is not all too dissimilar from the one that the Miami Hurricanes find themselves in against the Duke Blue Devils. And this, to me, is a great spot to back the U, catching 6.5 points against the Duke Blue Devils tonight. Miami is going to be a home dog for just the 3rd time this season, and the Hurricanes are 2-0 against the spread when booked as a home dog. This team caught 4.5 points from North Carolina just a few games ago. They covered that game despite it being a loss. This line elevated up to 6.5 is not the way I think it should be trending. I get it. You look at the U, and their last 4 games are all losses. But 3 of them are on the road. And the UNC game was a cover. So was their 8-point victory against Vatech at home. So in that 5-game window, the covers are coming at home. And that's what we know of this college basketball season. The Duke Blue Devils are still a team that I'm not looking to back on the road. Only 500 ATS as a road favorite so far on the season, 3-3-1. You go through their recent home or road win at Florida State. Good for them. That was their most recent game. I'm not going to be backing the Duke Blue Devils to rattle off a bunch of road victories here. And this is a number of 6.5 is what they lay to Florida State. I think the U certainly has a higher ceiling than that of the Florida State Seminoles, certainly this year. So I think it's a really nice spot to take the Miami Hurricanes, probably my favorite bet on tonight's college board. Just to finish out the other ACC portion of this, we mentioned it at the top of the show, but Marcus Burton, 2+ made threes, over 1.5 made threes. Marcus Burton is starting to see a big uptick in volume. In his most recent games, he's taken 18 threes over his last 3 games, which would be 6 per game on the year. He's done that in 5 games, 4-1 on the 2+ made 3 prop when he takes at least 6 attempts. On the season, when he takes at least 5, he's 4-3. So that's a good hit rate when you're getting plus money, which we are tonight on Marcus Burton. And this is his first game against Louisville. Look, you got to understand, Louisville is not a power level team. I know Notre Dame is not great. That Louisville defense is outside of the top 300. I mean, that is close to impossible to be inside a power conference and have a defense this bad. This is a freshman who is coming on, and his three-point percentage in ACC play is 33%. I know that's not great, but it was 25% out of conference. He is getting better. The volume is increasing, and he's playing the worst defense he has played in ACC action all season long. So give me Marcus Burton, 2+ made threes. Also, give me Grant Nelson tonight in this matchup between Alabama and Florida. Give me Grant Nelson over 18.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Grant Nelson in some recent games has been dealing with foul trouble. You look at his last 4 games, 3 fouls, 5 fouls, 5 fouls, 3 fouls, 3 fouls. But for me, what you have is a clear and obvious bounce back spot. 2 games in a row that Grant Nelson has missed an 18.5 PRA number. He has not missed this in 3 straight all season long. 2-0 in prior spots when he was preventing what would be a 3-game streak without 18 PRA. And look at this total. I think that is one of the other things that helps push me towards the over on this prop of 18.5 PRA, 174. We are going to have a billion possessions in this basketball game. So I really, really like this spot here tonight for Grant Nelson. I just want to quickly mention 2 spots in the Big East tonight. I am not on either game. I couldn't find a comfortable spot in either game, but I think they are fascinating betting spots tonight. And that is Marquette DePaul and St. John's Georgetown. Marquette, firstly, they are coming off being absolutely embarrassed at the hands of the UConn Huskies. So I think a lot of people would then want to turn and back Marquette. But wouldn't you rather be backing Marquette tonight, laying 2.5 at Providence, as opposed to laying 27.5 against DePaul? I mean, this game could be 30, and you can't turn it off. It's going to be close the whole way. There's going to be some people, I think, who do look to lay a first half get-in, get-out number. But 15.5 is hardly a discount. Hardly a discount for Marquette in this spot here against DePaul. It, for me, is a spot that I'll be staying away from. If I had to make a play in the game, it would be on the Cam Jones over points prop in this matchup. We saw him have a recent big game against Georgetown, and obviously this is a low-level team. So I bring that game up. Why do I bring up St. John's Georgetown? You know why. Because the last time we saw the Johnnies, Rick Pitino absolutely thrashed the basketball team. Called them out specifically, and called them out on some things that probably isn't going to sit right with a lot of people on that roster. So the question is, how are they going to look to turn it around? You know, that press conference from Rick Pitino, and I haven't really talked about it. I know JY brought it up. It is one of those things that does not feel like a rallying cry, but it feels like Ricky P throwing his hands up in the air like this is a lost season. And it probably is, unless they have themselves a great run to close out this regular season and maybe even in the Big East tournament. They are inside the top 50 on KenPom, but I'm not sure that's going to be enough for St. John's. Now, beating Georgetown tonight is hardly going to move the needle. Georgetown is atrocious. They have 1 win in Big East play.
but it makes for an interesting spot. Because tonight on this 9.5 number, if somehow Rick Pitino got through to this team, well, you're going to get yourselves then a great effort, and they could roll Georgetown by $1 billion. They could be up legitimate 20 points at half on Georgetown. At first half line's 5.5. But on the other end, if this team quits on Pitino, which it would not be super surprising, Georgetown can win this game outright. That would not be a stunning result either. If I had to make a play in that game, it would be on Joel Soriano, who is the leader of this team, who Rick Pitino fought tooth and nail for to stay with St. John's instead of entering the transfer portal, and who maybe got called out the worst by Rick Pitino, saying he's slow laterally. Like, that's the thing. Rick wasn't saying, Soriano doesn't care. Soriano had a bad game. He's not good enough. Does he take that personally tonight against a bad Georgetown team and step up in a major way? I'd look for his PRA prop if you're going to look to get involved. Two interesting Big East spots for you to keep your eyes on there. Let's close it out with the ice. I mentioned this at the top. I'm on Edmonton money line tonight against the Boston Bruins. If the line stinks, I don't care. I just think Boston's getting too much respect. Okay? First of all, this is the third time the Bruins will be on the road since January 15th. It is February 21st. Not a lot of road games. So I get it. They're a great road team. It's not like they've necessarily been putting that to the test a ton recently. They've been playing a lot of home hockey. And guess what? They've been losing a lot of home hockey. This team's lost 5 of their last 7 games. So if they're going to go to the west of Canada, get right? After this Edmonton game, they're playing Calgary? Stop this. That does not line up for me. Edmonton has not lost at home since December 16th. And this line's minus 134. No major injuries. I saw someone say, potentially you're going to get Boston here with momentum over there. Stop. Because Boston has stopped a 6-game, 5-game losing streak. They're on momentum because of a shootout victory. No, I don't see it that way. And maybe most importantly for the Oilers, who score a ton at home, is how their defense steps up. 2.58 goals allowed at home this season compared to 3.14 on the road. They are significantly better defensively at home. It shades me to the under in this game of 6.5, but give me Edmonton's money line there. And then give me a points prop. Over half a point for Mason McTavish later tonight of the Anaheim Ducks in their game against the Columbus Blue Jackets. He had a midseason stretch where he only recorded a point in 1 game out of a 9-game window. Well, what that means is he has 33 points in 38 games outside of that. He is better than that. He is closer to a point-a-game guy, and we're getting minus 110 for a point here. He recently had another stretch, 4 games without points. He has 9 points in his last 10 games since that. He's coming off of a hot 3-assist game against Buffalo. He has a 2-goal game already this month. It could come from an assist. It could come from a goal. Mason McTavish at home tonight, a home favorite, big-time 6.5 total. He gets a point on the board for the Anaheim Ducks. We're going to throw it over to our early line crew. We'll get you a best bet from the morning guys next right here on Game Time Decisions.
Caravan came back. They did have a couple of transfers here. The reality is UConn is every bit as talented and dangerous as they were 1 year ago.
If there's a guy, Joe Ranieri, that for 1 game could take a bunch of cast-offs and steal a game, his name's Eric Spoelstra.
Game Time Decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Like the Minnesota Wild were down by 2 goals today. They were down by 3 goals, actually, today at one point. And they came back and won. Like teams like, the Edmonton Oilers and the Coyote game went back and forth. The NHL really, you could argue, really is the best sport for in-game betting, where you can pull the trigger on both teams.
Sports Rage Late Night. Only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
What do we do with the Nets, though? Because this team is hot garbage. I mean, poor Jacques Vaughn. Talk about just wrong place, wrong times.
I mean, the reason that they parted ways with Jacques Vaughn in the first place, this is a team that, yes, they had Kyrie and KD at the beginning of the year last year, but they were still a team that made the playoffs. They were still a team that took the game off the 76ers. And going into the All-Star break, they weren't even in the play-in picture.
Newswire. Only on SportsGrid. Smarter to be on SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from three on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live. Prime time.
We got not one, but two coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
late
sort of
night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
We're live. It's Game Time Decisions. Joe Madden is up next to help us break down the ice. But before that, let's throw it to the morning crew. Ben Stevens, Donnie right side for a little bye. Best bet.
Before we say farewell and before we say goodbye, it is time for bye. One thing to know about Donnie Rightside, he's always hoping for a little bit of chaos before the show comes to a close. March is the month of madness and chaos. Before we get there, here in the final 10 days of February, what's the best bet on this Wednesday?
Let's have some fun with this one. I'm going to go with a team total to the over tonight. That's 74.5, and that's coming from Colorado State being on the road tonight going up against New Mexico. New Mexico actually has a decent defense, but styles do make fights here. If there's one team in conference play out there in the Mountain West that gives up more 2-point field goals, should I say points inside the paint here, it's actually New Mexico. So I'm going to take advantage of that. A game not relying on the three-point shot with crazy tempo tonight. No reason to believe that Colorado State can't land themselves in the mid-70s and cash this ticket. Give me Colorado State's team total over 74.5 tonight in a tilt against New Mexico at the pit.
All right, great breakdown as always there from DRS, who knows how to make his home on those team totals with mid-majors, though obviously that is hardly a sleeper game. New Mexico and Colorado State are two of the top 50 programs in college basketball this season. Colorado State is ranked. The expectation is minimum 4, possibly 6 teams from the Mountain West Conference this year making the NCAA tournament. We'll see how that plays out. Just to re-rack before they start, for me, the 7 o'clock college basketball plays. Miami, plus 6.5 against the Duke Blue Devils. Give me Grant Nelson over 18.5 points, rebounds, and assists of Alabama against the Florida Gators. And then Marcus Burden of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, 2+ made threes in their matchup on the road against the Louisville Cardinals. If you wanted a sizzle PRA parlay, Joel Soriano, Adu Thiero, and Cam Jones, we pieced together. We're back in less than a minute. Joe Madden helps us on the ice next.
Back with you here on SportsGrid. I'm Kevin Walsh. It is Game Time Decisions on a Wednesday night. And joining us to break down the NHL once again, it is Joe Madden. Joe, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Kevin. We had some nice bets last night, hoping to do the same tonight.
Yeah, I really messed up yesterday. Connor Verhaeghe to get an assist was something I wanted to bet. He had an assist 19 seconds into the game, and I didn't bet it. Now, my question to you, nobody had a hat trick yesterday, right?
No, there was no hat tricks. No, none at all.
We saw that. They didn't hang the no. We knew. We knew. Bad number. It's all good. We steered people clear. Let me rush to this Buffalo-Montreal game because that is going to have the puck drop quite soon here. Do you have some action with Buffalo as a road favorite against the Canadiens, 6.5 total?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting place to back Buffalo in a certain way. I'm going to look at their team total over the 3.5. This is a dad's trip here for the Buffalo Sabres, and this team is frustrated with how they lost that last game to the Ducks. I see the goals coming in now. Sam Montague in net for the Montreal Canadiens. I did have a lot of faith in him this season, but he hasn't looked great as of late. He's getting no support from the defense. And you look at Montreal, ever since they traded off Monahan over to the Winnipeg Jets, this team just hasn't looked right out there on the ice. So instead of looking at the full game total, I do think nice way to look at it is the Sabres team total over 3.5. I do think this one has every opportunity of going over the 6.5 as well. And at circle, Tage Thompson, Jeff Skinner for those anytime goals out there. But if you're looking for someone from Montreal, Suzuki has been so phenomenally strong. So these aren't two great teams. Neither team has great power plays. Neither team has great defense or goaltending at the moment, Kevin. So I really do like the Sabres team total over 3.5.
All right, there you go. Some action again. That one's going to start at 7:10. Also starting in the 7 o'clock hour is the game between the Blackhawks and the Flyers. And for Chicago, since Bedard has come back, he has been excellent. He has not just a point in every game, but it's actually gone up. First game back 1 point, then 2 points, and then 3 points. But as the case when he was out there before the injury, it doesn't result in a lot of wins, Joe. What do you expect the Blackhawks and the Flyers?
I think the Blackhawks are going to struggle again in this one. Connor Bedard just can't do it all out there on the ice himself, and they will have Sonderblom in net tonight. Now, Sonderblom's not a goalie that I really want to back at all. He's got a 4.01 goals against average, and he is just struggling. 873 save percentage. Urgent on the other side, and you look at the Philadelphia Flyers, and this team absolutely needs every win they can get to make the playoffs, trying to grab one of those spots. So I do think looking at the Flyers again, this is a nice place to look at their team total. I do feel they'll score here on Sonderblom. Looking at them over 3.5 goals in this one, coming in at -124. So it's a little juicy, but we know Owen Tibbett has been pivotal for them being able to get those goals. You can look at him for that anytime goal. I think the Flyers get it done tonight. They're just a better team overall. If you want to look at Connor Bedard for the points, I don't blame you, or for that anytime goal, but Urgent has been pretty solid in net. So I could see those struggles. This team just isn't finding a way to get these wins, Kevin.
All right, now we move over to the big game on the board. And believe it or not, Joe, we are on opposite sides in this game, which is Edmonton and Boston. But I'm okay with that, because I'm always down to learn. And I'm not really understanding why this Edmonton money line is so short. A team that has not lost at home since December 16th. Why are you on the Bruins in this game? What other props do you like here?
Okay, I love the Bruins tonight because when you look at the recent matchups between these two, the road team actually does have the ice advantage. The road team has won the last 6 meetings between these two teams. And we know Boston went through those struggles, losing those 4 games in a row. They were able to break it with that win over the Dallas Stars. And I really do think they have the momentum going into this game to be able to get things done. And I look at the scheduling spot here for Edmonton. Edmonton returning from a road trip. I don't like the spot for them in this one. Playing against the Boston Bruins, this is going to be an absolute hard matchup. I actually thought Edmonton, I don't believe it's a short price, Kevin. I think it's an overprice on that money line against the team that's sitting second in the Atlantic that's had some stumbles. I think these two teams are going to play each other so phenomenally hard tonight. I lean to this being a lower scoring game. I still don't trust Skinner in net though, so I'm going to stay off that full total, because if Skinner comes out solid, we could see this one staying under that total. But if the Boston Bruins hit him and hit him hard with Pasternak and all their talent out there, this one could go to that over. So I'm going to look at Pasternak for the anytime goal for the Boston Bruins. He's coming in at minus 105. In his career versus the Oilers, he's played 13 games. He's had 9 goals and 5 assists. And then Connor McDavid's being held off that scoreboard. You got to circle Connor McDavid here to find the back of the net. I do think he comes out solid because he knows he's been held off for the last 6 games, and he's been strong when he plays Boston. So he's had 4 goals and 12 assists in 11 games versus the Bruins. So looking at Connor McDavid tonight, he's coming in at plus 125. He has had 12 assists in his past 4 games. So he's still getting those assists. He just hasn't been getting those goals. And I do think the goal comes tonight, Kevin.
There you go. Look, a lot of great looks there. Again, I have no problem conceding to Joe. It was a spot there where I had to give the Edmonton money line a chance when I was expecting it to be a lot higher. I know Boston is good. They've just not played a lot of road hockey recently, even if they've been good on the road. Let's get to the rest of this slate here, Joe. The Coyotes in action against Toronto. What do you look for in this game?
I think this is a terrible scheduling spot for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Before you jump on them here to cover that puck line and get a big win over the Coyotes, I do think you look at the Coyotes here. Giving the Coyotes plus 1.5 on the puck line is too juicy, though. It's coming in right around minus 152. I think this is a live betting opportunity if Toronto goes up first to come back in on the Arizona Coyotes. I'm already sprinkling on that money line, but I will come back in on the puck line if we're getting more value. I do think at this point, before the game kicks off, you look at their team total over 2.5. That's coming in right around minus 142. So more reasonable for me out there. We look at the Coyotes and they are able to put up the goals on the Toronto Maple Leafs. They've covered that puck line and actually won the last 4 outright versus Toronto. And I do think this is an opportunity here with Toronto having Vegas on deck tomorrow and then the Avs on Saturday, that they look past the Arizona Coyotes, and at Mullet Arena, it can happen tonight here, Kevin.
All right, Joe, and then close it out for us. Anaheim and Columbus, tight line there, 6.5 total.
Yeah, I think this one is going to go over that total. You look at both of these teams, and while they do struggle offensively, their main struggles here are on the defensive side of the puck and goaltending. Tarasov in net for the Columbus Blue Jackets and John Gibson here for the Anaheim Ducks. I'm seeing both of these teams, especially with Columbus on the second night of the back-to-back, seeing more offensive production. I wouldn't be surprised if the Ducks themselves got, 5 goals like we saw a couple games ago out of them. I think their offense comes to play tonight.
Awesome stuff, as always. Joe Madden, always on the ice. I'm involved in that game as well. McTavish tonight, Joe, for a point. Minus 110. We got Mark Zinno stepping up next year. It's Game Time Decisions on a Wednesday night.
Caravan came back. They did have a couple of transfers here. The reality is UConn is every bit as talented and dangerous as they were 1 year ago.
If there's a guy, Joe Ranieri, that for one game could take a bunch of cast-offs and steal a game, his name's Eric Spoelstra.
Game Time Decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Like the Minnesota Wild were down by 2 goals today. They were down by 3 goals, actually, today at one point. And they came back and won. Like teams like, the Edmonton Oilers and the Coyote game went back and forth. The NHL really, you could argue, really is the best sport for in-game betting, where you can pull the trigger on both teams.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
What do we do with the Nets, though? Because this team is hot garbage. I mean, poor Jacques Vaughn. Talk about just wrong place, wrong times.
I mean, the reason that they parted ways with Jacques Vaughn in the first place, this is a team that, yes, they had Kyrie and KD at the beginning of the year last year, but they were still a team that made the playoffs. They were still a team that took the game off the 76ers. And going into the All-Star break, they weren't even in the play-in picture.
Newswire. Only on SportsGrid. Smarter to be on SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from three on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live. Prime time.
We got not one, but two coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
late
sort of
night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Live right here on SportsGrid, Game Time Decisions continues. Nice start for Grant Nelson against Alabama, but elsewise it's going well for the Gators at the under 12. They're up 20-18 with the dog leading. It actually has the live total up to 175.5, which is a bit wild. Mark Zinno now joins us here on Game Time Decisions. And Mark, I know there's some live action already on this college board that you're following.
Yeah, you know me, Kevin. I love the ugly games, or at least I've had some success this year finding some of the ugly dogs and taking them. I took Georgia Tech tonight. They're getting blown out pretty quickly. But then again, Clemson shooting 88% from the field. I don't know if that's sustainable. Past history has told me it's not really sustainable, so I hope Georgia Tech, who's beaten Duke, North Carolina, and Syracuse outright at home, might have a shot to get back in this thing and cover the number. Although before tip, the number was trending towards Clemson and up towards 7.5. Even 8 in certain shops. And then also on Oklahoma State tonight, maybe the worst team in the Big 12, second worst team in the Big 12. Cincinnati laying 10.5 is absolutely ludicrous. That's one of the worst offenses in the Big 12, if not the worst offense in the Big 12. And I just thought it was too big of a number here. So I took the Oklahoma State Cowboys, who, with the exception of really Kansas and Houston, are the only teams to really blow them out. They've been in a lot more close games than people really want to recognize here. So when I see a team laying more points than they've ever laid before all season long, to me, that's an opportunity to jump in and take the dog. I mean, most of the numbers sit where they are throughout the course of a season for a specific reason. On the flip side of that, if you look at that Charlotte-Memphis game, which I think gets underway here at 8 o'clock Eastern, that was a game where Memphis, 2-10 against the number this year at home. Like, crazy to think that they are that bad against the number. Stayed off the game, but they're only laying 5.5. Now, part of the reason that they're 2-10 is because they have been laying 17, 18, 19, 20 points earlier in the year, just weren't covering those numbers. This number was a lot lower than what they've been laying all year long. Felt like Charlotte was a good spot. Stayed off of it here just because it was one of those things where I'm like, there's a lot of paths for Memphis to cover this number. They're still a good basketball team, although they were overvalued earlier this year. And maybe Charlotte, who I thought has been playing above their head for a better part of this year, might end up getting got here after that one loss they took to South Florida. They had won, I think, 13 or 14. So it was a stay away for me. But just when you see those comparative numbers across the board, it's always an opportunity where I feel like I'm getting a little bit of line value, given the team is laying more than they've ever laid before in a certain spot.
I think it's an incredible breakdown. It's something I try and talk about. What would this number have been 2 weeks ago, right? And I was thinking about staying with Memphis and the 2-10 didn't, kind of kept me away from it. But look, Charlotte, I believe, is 1-4 against the number as a road dog this season. So this is not a spot they've thrived in.
Well, but also, again, they've been a favorite against a lot of teams in the American. I mean, look, there are some bad teams in the American, especially defensively. When you look at teams like Tulsa, you look at teams like UTSA. I mean, these are teams that are in the bottom, 300 in Ken Palm or lower in adjusted defensive efficiency. So they have some flaws against them. And the American also is one of the top conferences in the country in close games played by 4 or less or overtime. I think they're second out of every conference in the country where a large percentage of their games are played within close numbers. So if you're laying 2 possessions or higher, chances are that, the dog is going to cover that number.
Yeah, no doubt. Mark, let's stick in the American. This UTSA South Florida game, for I'm sure some people, is one they'll pass by, but not for you. You like this one tonight. Tell us what you're looking for.
Well, let me just start off by saying that I am an absolute glutton for punishment with this play. I have faded South Florida in their last 3 games against Charlotte, against Rice, and against Tulsa. I went 0-2-1 with a push with Rice. Kind of lucky at the end here that they pushed it in a 4, depending on what number you got. I got 4. Some people got 4.5 and covered. But, look, South Florida is on this incredible win streak. Are they really that good? I don't think so. I didn't really initially think that this was the team that would trip them up and go and steal a cover or even a win from them. But here's the thing about UTSA. Look, again, their defense, 357th in Ken Palm. There are 362 teams. Their defense is god-awful. Their best defense is like no defense, and to hope you just get in a shootout. But at some point, South Florida, who's in this sandwich spot, they just had that big win over FAU. They get SMU, one of the top 4 teams at home, coming up over the weekend. This sandwich spot here for UTSA, I think there's one of 2 paths for UTSA to cover this number. One of them, as I just mentioned, because UTSA is one of the fastest tempo teams in the country, they're top 10 in tempo, they'll get out and run. If they can get in a back-and-forth shootout game that somewhere ends, 89-85, we're in great shape, right? Like, that's a good cover for us. I think the other game script, if you look at South Florida, in the 4 of their losses this year, they've shot less than 40% of the field. They've only had 1 loss where they shot better than 40%. That's the other thing. Can South Florida continue to shoot at the level that they've been shooting throughout this entire win streak? Eventually, they're going to have to cool off. Again, glutton for punishment playing against them 4 consecutive games and not getting it done here. But it's one of those spots where I've just committed at this point to being on the side that finally trips up South Florida because I would have passed tonight and guarantee UTSA would have actually, covered the number. And I would say this too. This is one of these games where it's worth a sprinkle on the money line at plus 290. Because if South Florida is going to lose this game because they're shooting that or not cover this game because they're shooting that poorly, there's a solid chance they're going to lose the game outright. Like, that's the other part of this here. When you look at these spots and situations here, if I'm going to take the 6.5, great. Why not? And then I will absolutely throw a little sprinkle on the money line given the situation.
All right, Mark, let's stick with the mid-majors, though the Mountain West this year is certainly making an argument to, I don't know about shed that description, but, man, the top of the Mountain West is awesome. A lot of people love the top of this conference, and 2 of the very best in New Mexico and Colorado State are going at it late night here with a 10 o'clock tip. A pair of 20-6 basketball teams. Where's the advantage for you in this game?
Well, look, there's a system that I've been playing a lot this year. We've talked about it on the show. Anytime you have a home unranked favorite going up against a ranked road team, it's a process that's covering about 67% of the time this year. So I try to stay with it as often as I can. Here's the thing about this game. Usually in those spots, that home unranked favorite is laying 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5 in that range. Yeah. This number's pretty thick. And it's one of those spots where I'm like, well, they're telling you something for a reason. New Mexico is the best offense in the Mountain West. And that's, there's a lot of good offenses out there, but they are the most efficient offense in the Mountain West. And what we're realizing too now at this point in the season, I feel like home court advantage across college basketball is starting to amount to a lot more than 2 or 3 points. It's more like 4 or 5 in certain spots. So these home teams are really getting it done. And I played this game in the first half. I cut the game in half simply because it's one of those spots where, look, yes, New Mexico could absolutely be leading by only 2 or 3 and then open it up and run away with it. But the sort of formula has followed that these home teams jump out to the early lead, force the ranked team to play catch up a lot in a spot that they're not used to playing a lot. Why? Because they're ranked. they're usually beating up on teams for a full 40 minutes, and it sort of puts them at a disadvantage. So I played the first half -4. That's kind of like my limit on a first half play. I don't want to lay more than 4 because you start to just get into an uncomfortable territory there. But I think New Mexico gets it done regardless, but I felt a little bit more comfortable with a shorter number in the first 20.
I think it makes a lot of sense. And you hit on something, Mark, that I've been trying to, we're all trying to figure out is what is home court worth? Yeah. And last night, look, I played San Diego State. I was well aware of what I was going into by betting a ranked road dog against an unranked. I knew. But for me, I thought under normal circumstances, that might be 2 points the other way. And look, the game was within 1 under 4 minutes, right? It happens. But that home court advantage is so hefty. And I think if you are, and I think you said it, if you're comfortable saying that home court advantage is maybe worth as much as 5 points, in this line, there's no issue with this New Mexico line here, as much as 7.5. It's about how we try and evaluate what home court is worth. And I think if you're willing to be fluid with it, you can kind of really make hay then, because it's not going to be the same for every single basketball team. I mean, for the love of God, Nebraska is basically, there's a 12-point gap on who that team is, whether they're playing at home or on the road. Mark, if you have time, I might want to hold you on the other side, just get a couple quick looks at tomorrow's NBA slate, because I know there's some things catching your attention on that Thursday. We'll update you on the live college board as well. We're live on Wednesday night, Game Time Decisions.
Caravan came back. They did have a couple of transfers here. The reality is UConn is every bit as talented and dangerous as they were 1 year ago.
If there's a guy, Joe Ranieri, that for one game could take a bunch of cast-offs and steal a game, his name's Eric Spoelstra.
Game Time Decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Like the Minnesota Wild were down by 2 goals today. They were down by 3 goals, actually, today at one point. And they came back and won. Like teams like, the Edmonton Oilers and the Coyote game went back and forth. The NHL really, you could argue, really is the best sport for in-game betting, where you can pull the trigger on both teams.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
What do we do with the Nets, though? Because this team is hot garbage. I mean, poor Jacques Vaughn. Talk about just wrong place, wrong times.
I mean, the reason that they parted ways with Jacques Vaughn in the first place, this is a team that, yes, they had Kyrie and KD at the beginning of the year last year, but they were still a team that made the playoffs. They were still a team that took the game off the 76ers. And going into the All-Star break, they weren't even in the play-in picture.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid. Smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game Time Decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not one, but two coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
late
sort of
night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Game time decisions with you on SportsGrid. Mark Zinno still here tomorrow. The NBA comes back in a big way. Huge slate of action, Mark. And I probably won't get to talk to you again until next week. So tell me, what are you looking for here on this big Thursday card NBA-wise?
Well, I'll start with the sexiest game on the schedule. Clippers at OKC. OKC laying 2. I'll probably play OKC on the money line. You know, again, it's one of these things that the young team wants to make a statement. They've already beat LA in Oklahoma City earlier this year. Final game of the season series between these two. They lost the one in LA. It's a close enough number here where I can just jump on the money line, lay the 150, whatever it may be, and take OKC to get out of there with a win. We see the Memphis Grizzlies against the Houston Rockets. Did something change during the All-Star break that Houston all of a sudden learned how to play on the road? Well, until I see it, I'll fade them. I would like to take Memphis in the first half. If I get a -4, I'll lay the -4 in the first half with the Memphis Grizzlies. I think the total between Utah and Charlotte is low at 232.5. I would expect by tomorrow this number to start to move in a different direction, especially with Utah being at home. If Charlotte gets to 110 in that game, they should get over this number. And then even though Toronto is a corpse of a basketball team right now, the short number they're laying at home against Brooklyn looks pretty favorable. A money line spot for the Raptors at home, the first game out of the break.
All right, there you go. A lot of interesting looks on that slate tomorrow. I will say Dallas being positioned as a 2.5-point favorite. I know they're home against Phoenix.
Oh, that's
a very interesting number.
Bradley Beal is out. So, but I mean, does Beal move that line that much? Now, Dallas is a 2.5, 3-point favorite. It's a fishy line. I'll stay away.
I think, Mark, we'll see. I think Dallas is going to become an odds maker darling for 2 weeks, and then we'll see how justifiable it is. But Luka plus Kyrie healthy this year has been pretty good. At home, they've been really good, and they had a good deadline with P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford coming into town. But no, look, it's definitely one that jumps out. Again, Mark, we appreciate you joining us here. Best of luck late night as well with New Mexico.
Thanks, brother.
All right, great stuff, as always there. Now joining us on Game Time Decisions. Again, I've only been able to, I don't do a lot of Wednesdays, you guys know this. That's Scott Wetzel. And, I mean, takeaway one, usually when I'm talking to an in-game live member, I'm commenting on Sharapan wearing hats and jerseys. Scott, we look very similar tonight. Let's address this right off the bat here. How are you?
You got the memo. Clearly, you got the memo too, Kev, about the purple shirt and the jacket. Yeah, absolutely. So we're the only two that form in line. What's going on, my friend?
What's going on? Look, a lot of memos going around. Tell me this,
That's
though.
for sure.
Are you on this college basketball board? Anything you're following live right now?
I got a great play a little bit later on. It's the old, the old Hawaii versus San Jose Saturday night special. We got one of those, Kevin. But as far as the games going on right now, not great stuff right now. But I concentrate more on the later games since I do the in-game live. Start at 8 o'clock. So I'm more in tune with that one. With those games, but I did play some overs in there. The over LSU Kentucky game. I got the over Alabama game. That game's going on right now. Decent little pace, monster number 173, 174, depending on where and when you did your shopping. So in-game live now is right in the 172 area. So we're on pace, but we're going to need some points in that one. But that was the one early on that kind of stood out. Did play under in the Army game. In fact, I didn't even check and see. I got a lot of goofy teams, Kevin, that really have some great trends for unders. St. Peter's here in New Jersey, great under team. St. Peter's, right? But they play great unders, and so does Army, believe it or not. So I'm on those two. Well, St. Peter's doesn't play today, but Army does.
Yeah, Army and unders is definitely something I'm used to, but obviously that's more on the college football side of things. You mentioned Alabama, Florida, and that's going to be an interesting one. I know on In-Game Live tonight, you guys are going to be able to really follow it. It's the live total is 173.5,
it looks off pace to me, but I think, and this is something, again, you and I did a ton of in-game lives together. I think with the dog leading in Florida up 4, it's what's holding that live total at 173.5. Right there, Scott?
Right. And then, the other thing, Kev, is, again, we've been doing it a long time. When they don't drop that line, even though it's kind of a little slower than what it should be, I'm telling you, way more times than not, it's because they realize it's going to be a regression. And second half, in this case, the points are going to be coming second half. So I wouldn't be afraid of going in on the over again, or if you're originally on the over, don't worry about it, because otherwise that would be into the mid to low 160s at this pace. But the fact that they're not dropping it, that to me is a good sign.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. They're certainly expecting it. Let me ask you something, Scott, because this feels like something that you will actually be quite interested in, and that is good old Rick Pitino. Now, they're live right now, and this was going to go one of two ways. And obviously, with 7 minutes left here in the first half, it's revealed which way it was going to go. He calls out the team, but it's a different level. See, usually you call out a team to motivate them. It looked like Rick gave up. It looked like he went, oh, my God, we stink. And I'm a failure in year 1 at St. John's, and I'm going to pass the buck here. Usually, telling all your players you're too slow to play for me doesn't usually lead to great results. But playing an awful team like Georgetown, if these kids responded, you get 35-16 with under 7 to play, and the Johnnies right now are smashing the Hoyas. What did you make of those Pitino comments?
Yeah, I tell you, Kev, you said it exactly right. This is one game I didn't play, and a lot of guys on the podcast asked, where should we go? Because everyone's talking about this story. I'm like, you know what? I don't know. I really, they could be motivated and really come out and win one for the team, if you will, or they could just take these comments and say, screw you. You want to see how bad we can be? We'll lose to the worst team in the Big East. So I really didn't have a good feel for the game. It kind of like, you said it exactly, if you want to motivate a team, you say that we've had a bad stretch these last couple of games. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. We're not athletic. We're not playing defense, all because you know that they can play better defense and play better. But again, that's not what he said. It's almost like, Kevin, he made a bunch of promises, right? A lot of controversy, Catholic school, him coming down to St. John's with all his, checkered past. And I'm just theorizing that he made a whole bunch of promises and said, you know what, I'm going to change the culture. I know you got to put up with my past, but you know what, I'm going to change the culture from day one. We're going to have a winner from day one. I'm going to bring my kids down from Iona. We're going to do this. We're going to recruit. We're going to remember all the kids he kicked off the team? This is not the first time he said some outlandish statements. He came into St. John's and said, you know what, you guys suck. Get out of here. We don't want you. And he got rid of all the guys. So maybe he made some promises that he realizes now he can't keep. And he's trying to give up an excuse of like, listen, this is what it is. It's the first year. We're going to be better from here on out. We were kind of stuck with these guys. So I thought it was very weak. I thought the funny thing was at the end where he says, I don't want to say the wrong thing. He just rips the program, rips the team, and then says, I don't want to say the wrong
20
thing.
20 minutes of saying the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But here was the interesting thing, Scott. And for me, I don't think Scott's wearing an Iona polo to get that color.
No, not.
But no. I know this situation well enough. And what I will say is, when Walter Clayton, who is currently the leading scorer on a top 25 team in college basketball on the Florida Gators, who at the moment, by the way, is having another great basketball game, okay? When he entered the portal, everybody was like, oh, well, we know Rick's going to get him. And a lot of people thought that Rick Pitino, being this Hall of Fame head coach, was going to somehow make St. John's the place to be. And I said, if he doesn't get Walter Clayton, just know this whole thing will flop. If he can't get that kid to follow him from Iona, the whole thing is in trouble. And when he went to Florida, Scott, I knew their very first game they played Michigan in the Garden. Think about how awful Michigan is. I bet Michigan. Right. And it is one of those things. Look, Rick can still coach. But Rick decided to leave Iona, and I don't think Rick appreciated, and you know this, Scott, from obviously being around the area. What Rick did at Iona was not change the standard. He simply did what Tim Cluse did every year.
Right.
He won the MAC. Good for him. And I thought Rick understood that,
And I think he's made it very clear he didn't. He thought that what he accomplished at Iona was some holier-than-thou thing. And it wasn't. And now he's learning it the hard way at St. John's.
Yeah. And he's got the same issues at St. John's, Kev. I mean, I don't get it. I really don't. There is so much talent here in New York. If you look at basketball rosters around the country, I mean, it's littered with kids from New Jersey and New York. I don't understand how you can't keep 3-4 kids, right? That's basically all you need to really get your basketball team at the upper level. You can't keep 2, 3, 4 of those kids, but they can. The lure of playing at Madison Square Garden is not there anymore. The Knicks have been awful for the most part for the last 10 years, so that's no longer the attraction like it used to be when Patrick Ewing and company and the Knicks were really good. And they play in a rinky-dink little arena there in Queens. I don't know. You would think you'd be able to keep the kids, but so far, look, listen, one recruiting class. He was probably counting on that kid to come with him. He didn't. We'll see what happens this offseason. But I don't get throwing the kids under the bus, though. That was like, what was the purpose of that, Rick? You know? I mean.
And I'll just say this. I just from being here, that Madison Square Garden, it is not that much of a home court advantage. They play UConn at the Garden. I'm telling you right now, UConn is what – I mean, Hurley's like, we own the Garden. I mean, people don't go into the Garden on the other side of the court. I'll tell you right now, tell Patino to schedule a game against Duke, and you tell me who's the home team, okay? Yeah. At Madison Square Garden.
Used to be that way when they had Syracuse there. When they had Syracuse there, when they were in the biggest. Same thing, Kev. It was all Syracuse fans. It wasn't St. John's fans.
100%. So that's why. And look, Carnesecca is not this same thing. It's not Rupp. It's not Cameron Indoor. It's just not. But that's a whole different thing. We're going to take a break. Scott's going to stay here. I got some hockey questions. We're going to get to that and then some of the upcoming games tonight with you here on SportsGrid.
Caravan came back. They did have a couple of transfers here. The reality is UConn is every bit as talented and dangerous as they were 1 year ago.
If there's a guy, Joe Ranieri, that for one game could take a bunch of cast-offs and steal a game, his name's Eric Spoelstra.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Like the Minnesota Wild were down by 2 goals today. They were down by 3 goals, actually, today at one point. And they came back and won. Like teams like, the Edmonton Oilers and the Coyote game went back and forth. The NHL really, you could argue, really is the best sport for in-game betting where you can pull the trigger on both teams.
Sports Rage Late Night. Only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
What do we do with the Nets, though? Because this team is hot garbage. I mean, poor Jacques Vaughn. Talk about just wrong place, wrong times.
I mean, the reason that they parted ways with Jacques Vaughn in the first place, this is a team that, yes, they had Kyrie and KD at the beginning of the year last year, but they were still a team that made the playoffs. They were still a team that took the game off the 76ers. And going into the All-Star break, they weren't even in the play-in picture.
Newswire. Only on SportsGrid. Smarter to be on SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka
is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not one, but 2 coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
late
sort of
night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
All right, we're live with you right here. It's Game Time Decisions. Up next, we'll be in-game live. Scott Wetzel and Dave Sharapan with you on a Wednesday. Scott's here with us right now on Game Time Decisions. And Scott, I want to talk to you about the ice a little bit here because, look, I know when I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone, but obviously doing this show every night, I'm tracking, I'm following. And the Edmonton number surprised me. Now, you know this Bruins team well. But my takeaway, and just tell me where I'm wrong, or maybe I'm right, Edmonton hasn't lost at home since mid-December. Boston's not playing good hockey. Lost 5 of their last 7. They've hardly played any road hockey, basically in the month of February as is. This money line looks very short on Edmonton to me. What do you make of that game between the Oilers and the Bruins?
Yeah, and it even lowered. Like, I thought I saw it this afternoon earlier at like minus 154. Then it went down to 134. And you're right. They've 2-5 at home since the All-Star break. So we throw in the All-Star break and everything else. This is their first road game in eons. So they're not playing well. Edmonton's playing great, unbeatable at home. There's just a lot of respect for the Bruins, Kevin. They still do have the best record, or tied with it now with Florida. They're battling for the best record in the Eastern Conference. So I get it, I guess to a certain extent. It is a little like minus one, like the 154. I even did a little flinch, like, boy, I really thought Edmonton would be like 170 or so, to tell you the truth. But okay, 154. Right. Then when it went to the 134, unless I just misread it originally in the day. But, you're getting them, not quite pick them, I understand that. But, you're getting them at a pretty good price at home, Edmonton. So, it's kind of hard. You always got to check and see with the goaltenders. That's the first little thing when it comes to these hockey lines. If you do see something, you double check or you wait till later in the day to make sure the right goaltender is starting, because if the backup is starting, then that explains it all. And you don't know that. The bettor doesn't know that until later on in the afternoon, but you can bet your bottom dollar the books know that way before we do.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, and I'm double checking right now, Edmonton, are they in action tomorrow? Edmonton? No, they're not. I thought
so you should get the starter
then. Yeah, I mean, look, we'll see how it goes. It's just one of those things, to your point, where and minus 154 would have been. I wouldn't have probably bet it then, right? At that number, all right, maybe a little bit lighter, but it's not crazy light then. And I think it kind of then begs the question, how many teams can roll into Edmonton and we see a shorter number? I figure Colorado. I mean, anyone else?
Maybe Vancouver. Maybe Florida, the way they've been playing, but not many. That's really about it. A lot of it's just a reputation line. So, like I said, following the Bruins as a Bruins fan, it's hard to get a good number. It's hard to see Boston as an underdog. There's 2 ways you look at it. Either one, okay, Edmonton at home, basically, minus 135, no big deal. Or, boy, I can get plus 115 or so with the Bruins. I'll take that anywhere, at any place against anybody. So, I guess it settles in. They know what they're doing. It'll be a close game.
Yeah. Let me ask you another thing, though, that kind of ties into this. And then we'll talk more about the Toronto game, but Austin Matthews is probably going to factor into this conversation. But I've been pretty fascinated by Hart Trophy, the MVP, of course, for the NHL. McKinnon, for a while, was a minus 125 number, not super strong. But when you consider who he's battling, right, Kucherov, McDavid, and again, Austin Matthews now with, maybe tonight we'll officially have a 50-goal season on the board, is in this race here. Do you have a strong take or thought on this MVP race right now in the NHL?
I think it's wide open. I heard you, I was listening to your show, I think it was one day this week you were chatting with somebody. I forget who, and this topic came up, and I was surprised because FanDuel here in New York, they don't really offer the MVP lines on some of this stuff. So I wasn't sure that he was that much of a favorite, McKinnon. I'm like, whoa. I mean, I don't think he's that much of a favorite. You mentioned all the guys that you could throw out there. You can throw Pasternak for the Boston Bruins, who may end up with the best record in hockey. He's their best player by far. You could throw him in there. I think it will end up being one of the main core guys, the McDavids of the world, or McKinnon, or Austin Matthews now. But to say that I'm going to lay money, no matter what it is, with one of those three, I think that's an awful bet. I think any of those guys, the way Matthews has been playing, if Toronto really just continues to win and stuff, and ends up with one of the better records, there's a great chance he could be the MVP. So,
yeah, I mean, there was a moment. And I don't know. I didn't bet it because, again, I got to be honest with myself, right? Like, am I going to really invest big time in an NHL awards future? But they were hanging McKinnon versus the field. And the field was plus. I'm like, wow. Man, the field is – I mean, Connor McDavid's in the field. He basically wins the award for a single year, right? I mean, and McKinnon, it's interesting. He's not far off, right? But Kucherov right now has more points than him. McDavid, as long as he stays healthy, is favored to basically still pass McKinnon in points. And it's not as if, if Colorado had Vancouver's record, maybe it'd be different. But it's not like the Avs have the best record in all of hockey. They don't even at the moment have the best record in the Central. Again, McKinnon's great. I'm not saying he's not great. But, man, are those some absolute rock stars that he's trying to fend off? And Austin Matthews is on the board tonight in Arizona, Scott. Are you looking to bet on that game late night?
Oh, absolutely. He's from Arizona. Grew up a Coyotes fan.
Wow.
Doesn't have a lot of goals, Kevin. I think he's got like 5 in about 11 games against them. So, nothing crazy, but he does average over 4 shots a game against them. He's got 31 shots in his last 7 games against Arizona. So, and especially with this game being in Arizona, absolutely. We put a bet. In fact, I talked with Ranieri about it on one of the shows before the second half started here on Game Time Decisions. And FanDuel offered up a prop. Will Austin Matthews score 15 goals in the month of February? And they were offering 28-1. Now, Toronto had 12 games in the month. So it's over a goal a game, right? But for 28-1, why not, right? So, lo and behold, the guy's got 2 hat tricks. He's on fire. We need 7 goals in his last 6 games to hit that ticket. 2 of the games, not 1, but 2 are against Arizona, the team that he's going to get up for. He's got Vegas twice, and he's got a game against Colorado. So it's still a long shot, 7 goals in 6 games, but it's alive. The ticket is certainly alive at this point.
Well, the thing with Matthews, and it certainly is, Scott, and you'll find there are books, I think, that offer under half a goal. I think. Right?
Yeah,
so if you get late enough in the month, you'll be able to, with a 28-1 ticket. But the thing that's probably, look, having back-to-back games with a hat trick is obviously huge, but it's one of those things. He's already tied his month high for assists in February, and there's still plenty of hockey to play, right? So he's now doing a little bit of everything because the 73 points, again, it's all relative, but is actually, he's outside the top 5. And now this is where you can speak to it more than me, but it's one of those things where you're getting a lot of value. I am about to interrupt myself, though. I saw something, and I should have mentioned it earlier because now I got to see if it moved. But I was talking NBA, Scott, with Mark there for a moment, and I looked into this Laker-Warriors game, and the whole thing just locked. And they had open points props, and they had Anthony Davis at 25.5, and they had LeBron at 25.5. And I was going to bring up the fact that I swore they said LeBron was going to miss the game. I go, you know what? Why are we'll handle it tomorrow? And I just got the alert he's going to miss the game, and they just locked all the lines. How the hell does a sports book fall asleep on a LeBron prop, Scott? I get when they fall asleep on some other things. How do they fall asleep on a LeBron prop?
I wouldn't be posting any LeBron prop or AD until an hour before the game with those two guys, right? I mean, that is like, I was surprised they posted 20.5 for the All-Star game for LeBron. I said, this guy's not scoring 21 points basically in a regular season. He's not playing. He hasn't had that kind of attitude in the All-Star game for a long time. He'll play some, but there's no way in the world I thought he was ever going to get to 21, so that one cashed in. By the way, tomorrow, coach's fired system in play with the Brooklyn Nets, with Kevin Ollie first game. Now, I know it's after the All-Star break, which throws a little wrinkle into it, Kev, but I'll tell you, the LA Kings in hockey did the same thing. Fired their head coach just before the All-Star break, so you had like 5 days. You don't quite have that same kind of impetus with the players, but they came back and they won the first game. So good for the good for the NHL. I'm thinking the Brooklyn Nets the same thing. Good for them. So you got to play them tomorrow.
All right, there you go. They're in Toronto catching 2. The I'm curious, Scott. What do you make of Milwaukee the rest of the way? Because Doc Rivers has now found himself as the talk of the town. And, in an interesting way, though, like Doc entered the All-Star break, the talk of the town, because they went 3-7 with, in the first 10 games with Doc. And I, actually earlier this week, Scott, I bet them over the updated win total of 50.5. That they go 16-10, still with that talent. I think they can turn it around. All of a sudden, Doc starts saying, I don't know why they got rid of Adrian Griffin. J.J. Redick rips Doc. Austin Rivers is coming to his defense. Then Marcin Gortat, who, why, how, he's entering the conversation. I do not feel like this is what the Bucks needed now. That the star of the show is Doc Rivers, and whether or not he's throwing guys under the bus.
Yeah. And Giannis, Kev, has only scored 30 points like 3 or 4 times in these 10 games. I mean, it's really bizarre. Everyone thought that he was the one that forced the ouster, but then he came back and said, no, it wasn't me. Then there was this, rhetoric about how they were unhappy about how they were playing defense. Meanwhile, they gave up a gazillion points the first couple of games Doc took over. That is a bizarre situation, right? I mean, he's one of the nicest guys in the world, Doc Rivers, but, man, he's always putting himself in a bad situation, right? I mean, 3-7. The poor guy before him, Griffin, had the second-best record in the NBA. He gets whacked, and then he comes in, and they go 3-7. Like, wait, this is after firing a head coach who won the championship, oh, by the way. Let's not forget about that. I mean, what are they doing in Milwaukee?
That's one of those situations. I think even now when you listen to Doc, usually a coach wouldn't be like, I don't know why they fired this guy. That's a little. I think basically Doc got the phone call and he went, are you serious? And the agent told him, you literally cannot pass up the money. They're giving you a 5-year deal. I don't know why. You're going to coach Giannis. You just have to take it. And it was too good to pass up, even though Doc, I think, knew going into it, this is not going to go all that well. And I don't even think Doc's all that invested. Let me ask you quickly, Scott. I know you'll handle it tonight, but you mentioned you have a system play later on, college basketball, that you want to let people know about?
Yeah, we got 2 things real quickly. One, Buffalo Sabres and hockey. Kev, back to hockey for a second. This is the Fathers road trip. So the fathers of the Sabres are following Buffalo. I know they're down 1-0 against Montreal, but we always like to play that. We like it better with the mothers, but the fathers not bad. And then later on tonight, we got UNLV laying 6 now at the Air Force. Air Force, the worst team in the Mountain West. They have 1 win, Kevin, in their last 15 games. You know who that win was against? UNLV. At UNLV. By 32. Rebels circled this game. I think they win by double digits. Love that play.
All right, absolutely love it. The system plays from Scott Wetzel never disappoint. Scott, appreciate it. We'll catch you on In Game Live.
You got it, man. Appreciate it.
All right, great stuff as always there. We'll close this out with a little hockey prop best bet. Also, nobody checked the Duke Miami score. Nobody checked the Duke Miami.
Caravan came back. They did have a couple of transfers here. The reality is UConn is every bit as talented and dangerous as they were 1 year ago.
If there's a guy, Joe Ranieri, that for one game could take a bunch of cast-offs and steal a game, Name's Eric Spolstra.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Like the Minnesota Wild were down by 2 goals today. They were down by 3 goals, actually, today at one point. And they came back and won. Like teams like, the Edmonton Oilers and the Coyote game went back and forth. The NHL really, you could argue, really is the best sport for in-game betting, where you can pull the trigger on both teams.
Sports Rage Late Night. Only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
What do we do with the Nets, though? Because this team is hot garbage. I mean, poor Jacques Vaughn. Talk about just wrong place, wrong times.
I mean, the reason that they parted ways with Jacques Vaughn in the first place, this is a team that, yes, they had Kyrie and KD at the beginning of the year last year, but they were still a team that made the playoffs. They were still a team that took the game off the 76ers. And going into the All-Star break, they weren't even in the play-in picture.
Newswire. Only on SportsGrid. Smarter to be on SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live. Prime time.
We got not 1, but 2 coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
Late
sort
Night.
of has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Closing out, little game time decisions. Want to thank the crew that stopped by tonight. CT Betts, Brady Cannon, Joe Madden, Mark Zinno, and Scott Wetzel. Full house on a Walsh Wednesday. How about that? Including myself being here. Up next will be In-Game Live with Scott Wetzel and Dave Sharapan. So make sure you stay locked on SportsGrid. I just want to note quickly, because it's wild, St. John's, Georgetown, if you bet the Johnnies in the first half, that ended up not being a good time. You won a 14-2 run from the Hoyas to close out the half. They're down 7. Again, Johnny's covered. What a sweat. Also, side note, tough look for Miami. A lot of hoop to play, but currently, Duke shooting 50% from 3, 3 of 14 for the Hurricanes. Not good. Certainly not good. There is a lot of basketball left. Time will tell. Our boy Grant Nelson, though, did get off to a good start, so we'll see how he follows that all up there. But we close out the show with a best bet on the ice. The Anaheim Ducks and their matchup against the Columbus Blue Jackets presents to us Mason McTavish over half a point. This booked at -110. McTavish is starting to come on here. We had a early season drought where he only had recorded a point. It was a 3-point game, but still, it was the only game he recorded a point in a 9-game window. Outside of that, he had 33 points in 38 games. He recently had a 4-game window where he went pointless and has since then responded with 9 points in 10 games. He's coming off of a 3-assist game. Earlier this month, had a 2-goal game. I think you are going to see him involved tonight with the Anaheim Ducks. They're a home favorite, 6.5 total, so that team total tonight, 3.5. looking potentially 4 or 5 goals if they really take advantage of this Columbus team. Give me McTavish over half a point, and I am going to trust Edmonton tonight at minus 134 on their money line at home against the Boston Bruins. That is Game Time Decisions. I'm Kevin Walsh. Best of luck. In-game live is next.